Hi Andrew, thank you so much for helping with my project. To get things started, can you say a little bit about yourself?
My name's Andrew Kaluzniacki. I am well past middle age at this point. I do technical work. I'm a software engineer, um, and I guess I'm a techie, and I'm curious to find out uh, why I have the honor of being interviewed by you, and I'm happy to be helping your project.
And so, how long have you been in technology?
I've been writing software and working on technology since I was about 11 years old.
Do
So
you remember?
that's a lot of decades now.
Do you remember what your first computer was?
Yeah, well, so my I used to build ages ago. I used to build for a small computer store, Southwest Technical Products 6800 kits. And so that would be in the mid 70s. And then saved up enough money to buy a Commodore PET, and that was fine enough. But shortly thereafter, bought an Apple II Plus. I think the 48K version, and then with a memory card, so a whole 64K of memory, and wrote software for a company called Serious Software. I wrote a friend and I wrote a video game called Repton ages and ages ago. And so yeah, so that I guess that game would have been, I was 15 or 16 at that time. But
Wow! And do you remember what language you wrote it in?
oh yeah, it was assembly, 6502 assembly language. I mean, you couldn't get any kind of video game performance unless you were writing an assembly language.
Wow! And just thinking about the editors and stuff back then, that's a lot of attention to detail.
Well, I mean, right, the funny part about that sort of thing is that you care so much about yeah, you have very limited memory. Our game was there was a lot of source code in the game, but in order to save in order to save memory and in order to fit everything in for the assembler to fit in, we had to make our labels very small. So loop one, if we could save space by calling it L1 instead of loop one, or similarly truncated abbreviated names, then we could get the whole source code in for the assembler to work. It was a little bit faster to build. The other memory I have of that was I think the source code might have been 50 or 60 pages long, and the printers at that time, you were lucky to get they advertised with great enthusiasm that you could print one line per second, so it would take about a minute per page to print a line of to print the source code out. Yeah, those were the good old days. I very much enjoyed that sort of work.
I was just thinking that having shorter label names actually sped up the printing as well.
So the line printer was going to take a second to go across the line no matter what.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you didn't care for your type to be perfectly well aligned, it could print a line in one direction, extend the paper, page speed the paper, and then print in reverse. But you would pay for that a tiny bit because the dots would not perfectly well align. So if you wanted a very nice printout, you would print and print and print. But if you wanted speed, it would go bzz, 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 back and forth.
I remember, and it had like the little uh, tear off things on the side of the paper too,
Mhm.
uh, to help advance it. And you had like a whole stack. They all fed together.
That's yep, way back then. Uh, you know, uh, yeah, right up through I think the first, I guess the inkjets and the laser printers came out almost contemporaneously. when you could get an actual stack of letter paper and expect a printout. But there was something nice about the fan folded printouts for looking through your source code, because you could lay out 5 or 10 pages on the floor and look over it very carefully.
And assuming you didn't tear it, they would always be in order.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. And
Um, oh,
no, I was just going to add that, if you think back at that time, right, the display on the Apple II, I think, was 24 rows of 40 columns. So there was a big advantage if you wanted to see more than more than 24 rows of text at once. Having the printout was good. So my workflow was usually, to work on the code for a day or two and then make a fresh printout, and and take the printout and mark it up, what I was going to edit and what I was going to change, and get those typed in, and then always the trade-off, how long it takes to print, which was, I would set it to printing and go to school and hope that there wasn't a paper jam while I was gone.
I think the similar type of processes exist around 3D printing now. You kind of get it started,
Mhm.
go away, and you come back and hope there isn't some type of issue.
Hope it didn't shift on the platform. Hope that your what is it? Is it BPA? I forget. There's a couple different plastic types, but hope that your feedstock didn't jam. Hope that your heater didn't stop heating. But I mean, it's pretty great. The advance the it's hard sometimes to, you think I look around, and of course I think that there's, all kinds of room for technical advancement and amazing things, and I expect to see them, but I certainly didn't see 3D printing, as the future, and here we are. My kids print whatever they want out. I can make, you know, some bicycle part, or some, little part for whatever the house, and have that perfectly well printed. And that's the other, I mean, that's the other really cool thing, right? Is I was learning to program. My kids are learning, Onshape, or Fusion 360, or whatever the Autodesk tools are, AutoCAD. And it's not just for making pretty pictures. My kids have some project, and they're whipping through AutoCAD to make little parts. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely neat how it's developed. And I'm kind of curious, and if you remember what your expectations were around the future of computing when you were just getting started, and if it's been kind of in line with that, or you've been disappointed, or you've been surprised.
Oh, I would say, I mean, some of both, right? Uh, I look, I loved the idea that, the idea that I could write software and get a computer to do things, that I could get the computer to interact with me. Um, shortly, so shortly after high school, I went to work for Infocom, and I don't know if you're familiar with the text adventures like Zork, or I don't know, that may, at the time, Infocom was quite famous, and the point being that the Infocom adventures, you would type in sentences, you would type in commands to the computer. The computer would say to you, you were standing outside of a two-story house, and there's a mailbox, and there's a path to the house, and over to the south is a forest, and you would type a command. You would say, open mailbox, right? And the computer would say, well, inside the mailbox, you find letters, you read the letter, right? And so this was a textual interaction with the computers. And at that time, the parsing and the command capabilities of the Infocom game was considered, exceptionally advanced, right? You were speaking to a computer. The computer understood what you were saying. right? Now, that was exceptionally challenging technology at the time. Uh, but it was also, quite limited. The vocabulary that we could get the computers to understand might be a couple hundred words. The idea that you might add, attack the troll with the sword, with the sword, that's a whole nother, level of parsing and understanding. And now, of course, we can say whatever we wish to the computer. The computer, especially now with the Chat GPT stuff, um, has at least quite the appearance of exceptional understanding. Uh, so, so even 5 years ago, I don't know that I would have anticipated the kind of interaction that we have with ChatGPT. Um, I think in terms of how fast computers got, I bought into Moore's law pretty early, so I had an expectation that my Apple II was going to get to be 10 times as fast with the Macintosh, and that every couple of years I could expect my computer to be 10 times faster. And if if you become comfortable with factors of 10, you can kind of see where things are going. And then there's this other part, which so I went to school and I got a degree in physics. Okay. And uh I would say maybe it's a commonplace for physicists to say things like, well, you know, we understand the universe from elementary particles, and a brain is just a collection of elementary particles, and it's just switches, and it's just neurons. Now, of course, it's trillions of connections, right? And 20 years ago, to sit down and say, well, how many transistors would I need, to effectively mimic a brain? Well, it would be a crazy number. And yet here we are, where if you have a networked, some crazy Amazon computer with 10,000 GPUs, you're starting to get to that count, right? And so simply from a physics computational standpoint, right, we have that kind of scale of computation. So I expect that, that computers can be as smart as people. But every time we start talking about AI and the goalposts, right? There was a time back in the past where we never expected a computer to be a chess master, and yet that ship is long since sailed. The best humans cannot beat the best computers by any stretch. We thought the same for the game Go, right? Well, now we don't use that as a metric anymore of how good a computer is. Of course, a computer can beat players at Go. Computers are great, but computers can't do this or this or this. And well, some of that we'll figure out. I don't know if that's, I don't know. I don't know what the end effect will be, right? I read things. What did I read recently? I've read a handful of papers about computer aided design now, where the aid is sort of backed up by technology similar to ChatGPT, and the one that you may have even read this, being in your business. The one that I read had to do with mechanical engineering of flight hardware, space flight hardware, and the person described using that aid as interacting with an alien intern, right? Like you just weren't, you had no idea what the solution might be, and it was very difficult to uh to communicate clearly your requirements and your needs and so on. But as soon as you got there, they were going to come back with a solution that was half the weight and twice the stiffness that any human could have come up with. And 5 years ago, you couldn't have manufactured it because it's some kind of crazy shape. But now you can print it out. And so now you can make these parts, and you can do this design, and you can work on these challenges and come up with solutions that that would have been uh, impossibly labor intensive 5 years ago. All right, you would never have imagined being able to pay for the manufacture of such an object, and now you can just print it out in a few days.
It is quite astounding. Um, I I started this project back in 2019 when NASA announced that they were going to send astronauts to the surface of the moon by the end of 2024, of trying to capture people's perceptions and impressions and thoughts around that through kind of like informal conversations like this every day to the end of 2024. Because I think the 2020s are going to be sort of to space what the 1990s were to the internet and networking and that type of thing. Um, and so it's kind of interesting to see these other developments, and maybe they, in some ways, give us a way of understanding how transformative it might be in space if we're able to get through some technological barriers early and not too far from now. Um, I was wondering if you had thought about this.
Well, I mean, I pay attention, to all sorts of things technical. I've been a NASA fan, for as long as I, my dad woke me up in the middle of the night in 1969, to watch the landing.
And how old were you at that point?
Free.
3.
Yeah.
But you remember it.
Black and white TV. Yeah.
Wow. For a 3-year-old, do you have any recollections on what your impressions were?
Well, I don't have, no, I don't. I really don't. I have a memory of Neil Armstrong, uh, right? Yeah, Neil stepping off the ladder and onto the moon, and just my dad saying this is really important.
And then I guess a few years later in 1972, whenever Apollo 17 left the surface of the moon, that was the last time we went to the moon. Um, did that register in your world?
So no, there was that, and it's not like I kept that in my mind as something important until much later, until probably my late teens, uh, uh, to have occasion to remember that that I got to see that live. Um, my next sort of strong memory would have been, I think it would have been around 1980, maybe. I stayed home to watch the first free flight test of the space shuttle when it was taken up on the 747 and set free to land. And I mean, look, I follow all the stuff. I followed all this stuff as a kid. I watched Cosmos. I listened to Carl Sagan. I did all of these things. I ended up going to Caltech. So I was at a place that Carl Sagan was at. Caltech administers JPL. I was surrounded by my peers, many of whom had internships at JPL. So, following the space program, following astronomy, following the science, a lot of my peers were planetary geologists. I have people that I went to school with. We have you and I common connection in Jeff Grayson, who founded X Corps, and of course, it has always been nice see what his company had done with some of that rocketry and engine manufacture and everything. Um, so big fan of NASA. Uh, Before I knew better, I thought the space shuttle was a great thing. But of course, you do enough research and you realize that probably we should have stuck with Saturn quality launching. Not everybody really. People will say, well, the space shuttle allowed us to build the International Space Station, but I think it took 80 or 90 launches to build the space station, whereas Saturn could have launched the same mass in I think four launches. So
Mhm.
so you go through and think about some of these techniques and technologies, and that's terrific. And I'm a big proponent. Yes, we should explore the solar system. Yes, we should go back to the moon. Um, I think that we should have people on the moon, but we are quickly getting to the point where robotic exploration of the solar system is probably much more efficient, right? I don't think the impetus for going to Mars with people is research science or exploration anymore. I think there is still an impetus for taking people to the moon and taking people to Mars, mostly because I think there's a long-term benefit to being of course Musk would say multi-planetary, right? I think I think that's what we do. Um, I think if you look far enough ahead and ask, can we be multi star system? I don't know that that's biological humans that are going to be multi-star system. I don't know about that.
And it's kind of interesting talking about robotic exploration. The others that I guess that could evolve into robotic development as well. You send a fleet of robots to Mars, you get the mining, you get the facilities set up, and you completely forget, skip over that difficult stage where there's no infrastructure with humans, and essentially the humans arrive in a completely working civilization with
Mhm.
more like a resort.
Yeah, well, and that may happen. I don't know if if mining and exploration are the goal, the surface of Mars might not be the preferred destination, right? If we're looking for resources, um, then asteroids probably provide all the material resources we would need, and you don't have to bring them up and out of a gravity well, right? So there's advantages to not going down onto the surface of a planet. Um, if the idea is to propagate, humans across many environments where we can live, then sure, I would guess that that the surface of Mars is a good idea, and some eventual, you know, if I want to think out hundreds or 1,000 years into the future, terraforming Mars might be a great thing. I don't know that. I mean, like we could. I think that eventually the possibility of doing that from a technical standpoint is not impossible at all. I mean, I think so. When I think about the things that we can do as a species, right, and none of this is particularly novel thought, right? Uh, uh, I forget what I think it was I forget which scientist classifies civilizations by the amount of energy that they use. Um, and we use what 1% of the solar energy that falls on the surface of the Earth right now, and at some point, civilization seems to require ever more energy, right? I think it's inevitable that, you know, we're going to increase the amount of energy that we harness by a factor of 10 and then by a factor of 100, similar to how we harness computational resources, right? We've we've uh, we've increased the amount of computation that humankind can do. I don't know by how many orders of magnitude in the last 40 or 50 years. If we increased the amount of energy that we harness and that we have control over and that we can, you know, do specific things with by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude, um, I, I don't think anybody could imagine what that future would be. I mean, if so many, of course, it depends on us as a species, but you know, if you had 10 times the amount of energy expended per person, and you could do it in whatever way necessary, right? I think that would certainly be enough energy to feed and house everybody on the planet. But you have to use it correctly, right? I mean, we have arguably we have resources necessary to solve a lot of problems, but we don't have the correct institutions to drive that problem solving, right? I think there's additional work to be done in building institutions that that figure out how to solve the human problems that we want solved.
Maybe to boil it down into oversimplification, we have the power, but not the wisdom.
Well, sure. I mean, I think that is, but I don't know, like wisdom, you know, there's individual wisdom. You know, I worry about what am I going to do for my family? What am I going to do for my retirement? How am I going to take care of my kids? And then you know, you take that up a couple of steps. What can I do for my um, community? What can I do for my country? Uh, and ideally, right, what can I do for the rest of my species and the rest of everybody, all of the, you know, other life on Earth that we would care to take care of. You know, you can look at various extinctions and be quite sad about them, right? I would like to help all primates. I would like to help all of the whales. I would like, you know, there's many things that I would like to come out of the ability to harness, you know, ever increasing amounts of energy. But I don't know what the connection is between, you know, how to call a government wise or what the motivation is for again, I'm just going to call it institutions. And when I say institution, I do mean I mean these things like our governments and like our corporate entities and all of the things that, you know, that involve uh, uh, the daily, you know, execution of human effort. So I don't
It
know, you know, I don't know where that motivation comes from or where it might be headed.
it is kind of exciting to think about a world that's um, uh, where everybody's fed and everybody's living peaceful, productive lives, working together in harmony, and kind of what it would take to get there. But
Well, you know, so I'm pretty sure everybody that everybody like me is also science fiction fan, and you read the science fiction, and it's terrific that those stories anticipate that kind of stuff. And so when you talk about that that future where we are all fed and um, meaningfully occupied, right? That's the sort of the Star Trek future, right? Where, everything is fine here on Earth, and we're exploring the universe, and we all have meaningful existences, and nobody worries about the money that they need to spend for food. And so sure, we can imagine that. I mean, that would be great.
Now, NASA has attempted to go to the moon several times since Apollo, and their efforts have ranged from just saying we would like to go to the moon to lots of PowerPoints to maybe even more concerted efforts like the Constellation program and the Vision for Space Exploration in the George Bush days. Um, how confident are you that we'll actually make it this time with Artemis?
I don't know, 50-50, maybe a little less. Um, I, you know, NASA is beholden to political will. And the question is if we have the political will uh, to send people to the moon again. I'm sure there is going to be a large question of whether or not um, it should be a national effort or a private effort. Uh, I think, we're frequently uh, driven by concerns of security and technical uh, competence, right? It does, is there some, national benefit to the technical competence that is necessary to put people on the moon? I personally, I think so. But it's very difficult to look at the Artemis launcher and the costs involved in that and compare them to what surely is just around the corner with Starship, and say, well, if Starship has some successful launches and is well, I guess we don't even need to man certify Starship for launch, right? We can use Falcon 9. Falcon 9's already man certified. And right, and of course, currently the only thing likely to be man certified from the US for a while, given the challenges that Boeing has had with their manned crewed vehicle. So at $1 billion a launch, I don't know if I want my tax money spent on sending people to the moon via NASA, but would I be happy if SpaceX in their effort to head out to Mars was to put people on the moon? Sure, that would be great. And I think, it's hard to look at those two programs and how they've progressed and to think that Artemis is going to be anywhere near financially effective compared to Starship.
It is really kind of interesting. It's sort of watching the mainframe and the PC kind of.
It is. Well, I mean, it is. I think you were exactly right. Now, to be fair, there are still plenty of mainframes in actual use. Many people don't realize that, but there's a lot of work that the mainframe is still a thing. IBM still builds them. I think HP may build something similar. I forget, but it's not like those machines are gone. They're just not what you think about, when you think about Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Microsoft Cloud and the kind of computation and very fast development and fast in what am I looking for? Uh, Quick
Right.
innovation. The banks use them, the insurance companies use them, they have excellent the mainframes. They have excellent and well understood places in business. But if I'm starting a new company, I'm probably not looking to go experiment on a mainframe. I'm going to look for, what is my quickest path to some kind of revenue stream, not using my own equipment. So, if I'm going to experiment, it's probably going to be on AWS.
Hmm.
And I think, I look, I it's hard not to come off as a SpaceX super fan, but I did not anticipate reusable spacecraft. I did not anticipate that there would be enough of a market to need reusable spacecraft. All right, but SpaceX and Elon Musk have, I mean, he's really done a level of business development that was necessary to drive the technical and the other developments in SpaceX. I mean, look, I don't have a deep understanding, but my rough understanding um, is that Starlink is probably the #1 customer for the SpaceX launches, right? Well, that's pretty smart. Okay, I want to build reusable rocket ships, but we don't have enough of a market. Okay, well, what market could we have? Well, we could have, if I get to pay for my own launches for Starlink, then maybe we can drive the cost of Starlink down and these giant satellite constellations to where where space-based internet and space-based communication are economically reasonable, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I'm sure you do remember. I don't know if your entire audience remembers what was it called? Iridium, right?
Mhm.
Iridium for the longest time was, that was a satellite telephone, and it was exceptionally expensive. And I think Iridium probably went out of business 2 or 3 times, every time to be saved by the DoD, because the idea of a satellite phone from anywhere is pretty important to the DoD. I think a satellite phone call from anywhere is important to a lot of enterprises. Maybe not everybody realizes that every commercial jet has telemetry from all of their engines going back to the engine manufacturer 24/7. Right, there are these network operation centers that take telemetry from every engine that's running constantly, so that they know what the maintenance is going to be necessary on them. Right, that's amazing to me. I just saw an IMAX movie the other day on trains, and they have the same thing. Every engine that's running, every power plant, every train, all of this information comes back to a network operations center, so they know when the engines need maintenance, well before they need maintenance, and they can put into place when that maintenance is going to happen. And um, this sort of ubiquitous communication is probably not something that I wouldn't have anticipated it to be so easy, right? The idea that my cell phone in a year or two, and if you bought T-Mobile imminently, that my cell phone can make a phone call to a satellite and to anywhere, that's crazy amazing. Right, that is just absolutely crazy amazing. The idea that, I mean, that there's, of course, there's the downside to it, right? Who wants to be hiking in Yosemite and have to hear somebody on their cell phone? I don't. Um, on the other hand, if you need, if you are hiking in Yosemite and you twist your ankle out in the middle of nowhere, you can actually make a phone call and get some help.
It's Yeah, it's amazing. It's you got the good and the bad. Every coin has two sides, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so back, back to the point that 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 without all of those pieces, right? Without SpaceX dropping the launch cost, without Starlink providing a market for SpaceX, without these further connections that you can have Starlink. And I don't know. I think that I hear that I think they're cash flow positive now. I think they might actually be either on the verge of or currently profitable. So they have enough people paying for their service, right? And it's early, right? Pretty soon they're going to have every airplane on the planet, every commercial jet on the planet is going to have a Starlink terminal on it so that they can get fast internet to their customers on the airplane. I mean that the market's there clearly, and the farther along SpaceX is able to drop the cost of launch, the faster those markets are going to come. And there's going to be other markets, right? When like so here's where where I have my huge optimism, and I can't wait. You know, uh the James Webb Telescope, I don't know what the final total cost on that was, $5 billion, $10 billion, something crazy. Okay. And took, I don't know, 20 years to build and test and to finally fly. And so much of that cost was driven by a cascade of other costs and risks. Because if you're going to put that spaceship out there, you need it to be the best and the most amazing. But you have to fit it into a container small enough to put on a launch platform. And so there's all of this complication and how do we unfold it and how to, I mean, like origami, origami based manufacturing. I mean, it's really astoundingly complex, but that's all predicated on the initial launch cost being a couple $100 million, right? If I'm going to pay a couple $100 million and I only have this much space and we're only going to do this once every 20 years, we better make it well worth the effort, and it can't fail, right? So now I got to test it 5 times and make sure that it's not going to fail because now I put in so much money. But with Starship, if you drop the launch cost by a factor of 10 or even more, in fact, potentially a factor of 100, hard for me to imagine that. But if the launch cost for the James Webb comes down to $10 million or $20 million, I can launch a number of them. If the volume of the oh, come on now. If the volume of the launch container is up by a factor of, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's a factor of almost 100, right? This Starship is going to have crazy launch volume. I don't have to worry so much. I might be able to make a 5-year project, and it doesn't have to be the best because I know that 5 years from now I can launch again the next thing that I build. So we can, they can the next space telescope might have a 30-meter aperture or a 100-meter aperture, and it's not going to be an issue of spending 20 years to make sure that it doesn't fail. We'll just launch one.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, even looking at trying to use things that were built for terrestrial purposes and not having to create one-offs for space. I mean, that could be huge as well.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
um,
I can't wait. I mean, it's gonna be crazy awesome. The other one that for me personally I'm following a lot is the laser-based gravitational interferometer. So I think
mm,
it's LISA. I don't know quite where they are with LISA, but we can launch those things now for dirt cheap. They can do the tests and the experiments, or not maybe right now dirt cheap, but within a year or two here, the launch cost will be down another factor of 10, probably. Um, I think that kind of science is going to be astounding. I think optical and other astronomy from space with whole fleets of telescopes is going to be astounding.
It, it will be amazing. And I saw one presentation about using this gravitational lensing of the sun. Apparently, like the focal points about around Pluto, and
Hmm.
to be able to put telescopes there and actually, use the sun as a gigantic lens to see the rest of the universe.
Yeah, and right, and which would be so cool. That would be. I think I've read one or two things on that, similar to you. Uh, thanks to thanks to the amount of fuel and such that we can launch now, getting out to Pluto might not be a multi-decade task, right? It might be a 3 or 4 or 5 year task instead of, I don't know how long originally Voyager took to get out there, but my recollection is somewhere between 15 and 20 years to go the whole length of the solar system. And that time frame should come down quite a lot. If you have enough fuel, you can get out there much faster.
So just kind of bringing it to a personal level, if you could take a trip to space, would you?
I don't know anymore. The risk would have to come way down. I'm as I mentioned, I am in my uh, at this point with family and children and those kinds of responsibilities. The risk reward would have to be different. Would I like to? Of course, I would like to. It would be great. I would love to go to space. Um, I don't know what I would do there exactly, right? Like, would I like to go to the moon? Probably, sure. Would I like to orbit the planet? Sure. But unfortunately, the whole pragmatic question of, why would I need to do this personally is rather harder to come up with a reason.
Well, just to focus in on that risk aspect a little bit finer, do you have a sense on how many people would need to go ahead of you before you're like, I think it's safe enough?
Well, so I think right now the odds of surviving a trip to space are about 1 in 100, maybe a little better than that. All right, if you add up the costs of if you do the calculus, right, we lost I think 14 astronauts on the shuttles. Um, and I don't know if we have had 140 astronauts in space since then. So for any given person, the reality is we seem to lose probably 1% of our astronauts, and that's an exceptionally high risk. Uh, I would say I think compared to commercial air travel, right, which is 1 in 10 or 1 in 50 million. I mean, I would never think twice about getting on an airplane. The standard comparison is you're more likely to die in an accident in your car on the way to the airport. I think that's true. So, do I need to see 1,000 people or 10,000 people go and return before it's comparable? Perhaps. Again, at the point where it's 1 in 10,000, I guess I'm probably not worried about it, right? I mean, that's really my risk metric. I'll I, I'll be happy to go up in a private airplane. And I think you really are starting now to get risk metrics that are 1 in 10,000, uh, as opposed to 1 in 10 million for commercial air. Um, but I just don't see it as sort of as an amusement ride, right? In my 20s and 30s, that would be a great amusement ride to go on. In my 60s or 70s or whatever I would be when that might be possible, right, in the future. I don't know that that's something that I need to do.
It is kind of ironic, right? Whenever you're young, you think you're invincible, but you have all your life ahead of you. But as you get older, you realize your limits, and less and less is on the line.
That is true. I mean, yes, absolutely, and it is certainly ironic. I Amongst the technologies and the things that I follow a little bit, of course, I'm also following the longevity advances that are likely to happen. I'm I am looking forward to some of those simple technologies where I can grow a new knee or a new hip without having to have a metal implant. And I'm hoping to hold out until those things are possible. I of course uh, they talk constantly about, well, you'll be able to grow new teeth pretty soon. So sure, that would be great too. So I think we are on the imminent verge of large advances in longevity. There's a couple people that I follow on that. Um, I don't know if holding out for another 10 or 20 or 30 years is going to be long enough. It might, 30 years ago, uh, we didn't have any of the crazy, amazing DNA technology that we do now. Um, you know, I can sequence my entire genome for I don't know what it is, $1,000 now.
Hmm.
You know, what so if there's individually specific DNA uh, 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 programs or treatments or whatever, the idea that you're going to sequence somebody's individual DNA to benefit their treatment for whatever whatever ails them, that's just going to be standard procedure now, right? The cost, it costs less than it's like down to the cost of getting an MRI.
No more mass manufactured medicines. Everything be personalized to the individual.
Possibly so, possibly so, yeah. And the same thing with the whole 3D manufacturing, right? They take an MRI of whatever joint needs to be rebuilt, and they'll rebuild it. But maybe they'll be printing it out of biological material instead of titanium. Who knows?
Hmm. Definitely an interesting future. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate your time this morning to talk to me and share your thoughts. And I think generations in the future will look back on this decade and see it as transformational. And it'd be good to have your perspective as well.
Well, I appreciate that you came up with this idea for this project and that you're making the effort to interview. I scrolled through some of your web page. You must have hundreds of interviews already in the can. I mean,
Close to 1,500.
yeah, that's congratulations on your project. That's an enormous amount of effort to talk to that many people. And I wish you the best in the remainder of 2024. But probably you have more than another year before we get back to the moon. So if you extend your interviews until we get there, you might end up putting a whole lot more into the can.
And on that note, if you know of anybody that'd be willing to participate, please send them
Boy,
my way.
I looked at some of those lists. I noticed the little bit of the list that you're following on Twitter. I don't know. Have you interviewed Jeff Grayson yet?
I have not. I have not. I
Well,
need to.
you should. I can't imagine that he would turn you down.
I'll reach out to him, and he has like a radio voice too, so it's always pleasant to listen to.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Nathan. I really appreciate it. And when we get there, why don't you drop me another note and maybe we can talk again.
Sounds great. Well, take care, Andrew.
All
Hope
right.
you have a good day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.